Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Welcome, everyone, to Creating a Family. Talk about infertility and adoption. Today we're going to be talking about donor conception, navigating donor and sibling relationships. A fascinating topic, one that is of high interest to our audience, as is evidenced by the number of questions we received. I think you're really going to enjoy the show. Here's a sample of what you're going to hear.
In today's day and age, there are ways to, help identify those siblings or half-siblings. And there's no such thing as anonymity. So the father can reach out and say, I'll help you look for them. I don't know if there are donor siblings or not. But I'll help you. So it's almost like telling his daughter that her, like respecting her curiosity and asking her how he can help her.
I'm Dawn Davenport. I'm the director of Creating a Family. We are the National Infertility and Adoption Education and Support nonprofit. You can find us online at creatingafamily.org. We're a weekly radio show, and we use the podcast model. That way you can listen whenever and wherever you want. I am a podcast addict. I am obsessed with podcasts. I only listen to podcasts whenever, every chance I get, and some chances that I don't get, I still sneak them in. One of the advantages of podcasts is that you can subscribe and automatically get notice of the next week's topic. Whatever device it is you are listening to this show on, assuming it's one of your phone or a tablet, you can subscribe using whatever app you're using. Or if you're listening through your computer, go to the radio show page of our website, which is under resources on our site, and we have information on how to subscribe there. This show is underwritten by our corporate sponsor, Ferring Pharmaceutical. For women who have been undergoing fertility treatment and are still struggling to conceive, daily scenarios and interactions can take a toll on their emotional health. Ferticom is a newly released app for Apple and Android phones developed by reproductive psychologist Dr. Alice Domar and Dr. Elizabeth Grill. It was designed specifically to help women address the many challenging emotional life situations that arise when struggling to conceive. Using cognitive, behavioral, and relaxation techniques, Ferticom offers users more than 500 different coping options for over 50 specific situations that have the potential to cause distress during the family-building journey. To get more information, you can go to their website, ferticomapp.com. That is ferticalmapp.com. This show, as well as all the resources provided by Creating a Family, could not happen without the generous support from our gold sponsors who believe in our mission of providing unbiased education and support to those struggling to create a family. One of our wonderful gold sponsors is Fairfax Cryobank. In fact, Fairfax was the one who suggested this topic. They received questions from the families who have utilized their donor sperm and on this topic, and they asked if we could do a show covering it. So thank you, Fairfax Cryobank, both for your support as well as for the suggestion, this great suggestion for a topic. Fairfax has been a leader in sperm donation for over 25 years, and they are dedicated to supplying updated, verified, and accurate medical and personal information on their donors. Only 1 in 200 applicants make it through the screening process to become a donor. You can find out information on all of our sponsors by going to our website and looking under either infertility or adoption and click on the Find a Professional tab. Today, we're going to be talking about donor conception, specifically navigating donor and sibling relationships. Our guest is Dr. Elaine, I keep doing that. I have a good friend named Eileen, so I have a problem with that. Elaine Gordon. She is a clinical psychologist specializing in reproductive medicine and third-party family building. She has almost 30 years' experience in this field and is author of the great book, Mommy, Did I Grow in Your Tummy? Where Babies Come From. This book is dedicated to explaining the various reproductive options to children. Welcome, Dr. Gordon, to Creating a Family.
It's great being here, and I'm happy I was invited.
Thanks. We're going to be talking about families created by donor conception, and that includes families created by donor sperm, donor egg, and donor embryo. And all of these types of conception might have the possibility for contact with either the donor or with other children conceived by the same donor. They're often called donor siblings. I may be wrong, but I would assume that the option for contact with either the donor or the donor siblings is greater when using donated sperm, if for the only reason that sperm donation has been going on longer, and also there's been more push for contact as the donor conceived people are now adults, well into adulthood, and it also seems like it's more facilitated by cryobanks and the new, or not even new anymore, but the donor sibling registries. Do you see that this is more of an issue in your practice with donor sperm for those reasons, or is that just my perception from where I'm looking?
I think donor sperm has been around for a very long time, but it has been cloaked in a lot of secrecy and anonymity.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think with egg donation, I think that is there's more options available for people that are utilizing egg donors, because they do have more options in terms of meeting the donor than they do using donor sperm. So I think that sort of changes the scenario a little bit, even though everybody is starting to ask about donor siblings, because a lot of these children are coming of age.
Yeah, and I hear we've done some panels on donor, or a panel actually, and we've had donor conceived people on other shows, but we actually had a fascinating show with a panel of donor conceived adults. And it seems to me when I talk with donor conceived people that often the interest in their siblings through their donor, half siblings through their donor, or full siblings, I guess, if it's donor embryo. It seems like there's a high interest in forming relationships, or at least knowing about siblings, often more than knowing about the donor itself. Do you see this as well?
Yes, I do. And I think it's not, when you talk about forming relationships, they don't look necessarily each other as brothers and sisters. They look at each other as friends. They're curious. It's they want to know about their identity. So I am seeing a lot more of that in my practice, and people are coming, in asking me to help navigate those meetings or relationships. I'm seeing that more and more.
That's fascinating. All right, let me jump into one of the questions we got. This is from Eric. We have 2 kids by 2 different egg donors. My eldest, who is a girl and is 10, is very interested in her donor. She just realized that she may have he puts this in quotes, sister, if her donor has a daughter. And then she started to realize that the donor may have donated eggs to another family, so she has even more possibility of a sister. Our other child is a 4-year-old boy, and she wants a sister. I think he means his oldest wants a sister. She wants contact now with the donor and wants to know if she has siblings. We did an anonymous donation. I wonder if this is partly because she doesn't have a mother, because we are a 2-dad family. My question is how to address her very, very strong desire for information and contact when we don't have this information. I imagine you see this as well. Thoughts for Eric raises a couple of issues. One, she's 10 and is now expressing an interest. Is this partly a developmental thing, that she's reaching an age where she has a comprehension and just caught on to the idea that in fact there's 2 different ways she might be able to have a half sibling?
It's a developmental issue, but it's also a gender issue. Girls in general are just more interested in babies, where babies come from, genetics and all of that. That's not to say that his son may not be interested down the line. But, children that want to know, how did you handle that? Because it was an anonymous donation. You handled it basically with the truth, because the dads need to sort of explain to their daughter that at the time they were doing donation, they were just following the guidelines of the programs they were working with. And the guidelines were suggesting an anonymous donation. But in today's day and age, there are ways to, help identify those siblings or half-siblings. And there's no such thing as anonymity. So the father can reach out and say, I'll help you look for them. I don't know if there are donor siblings or not, but I'll help you. So it's almost like telling his daughter that her, like respecting her curiosity and asking her how he can help her, and just forming sort of a plan together.
You said there are ways to look. I realize this is not necessarily your area of expertise, but how would somebody, in the case of an anonymous donation, going back to, I don't know if he used a clinic or an egg donor agency, but if they've promised anonymity, most will not give out identifying information.
They won't give out the identifying information, but I've been speaking about this issue a long time now, this year basically. I speak about there's no such thing as anonymity. We have facial recognition. We have the social media. There's the DNA identification. So there are ways to make contact with people that you're related to that are, unknown to you at this point. So that could be a plan that they could put in place. And I don't think it's because she doesn't have a mother. I think she just wants to know about herself. She wants to know about brothers and sisters and relationships. It's developmental. So her identity, she's really trying to put together who she is and get all the pieces in place.
And this is a two-dad family, but I've heard this question when, in the case where if it's donor sperm, I've heard it where the father, and if it's donor egg, I've heard it where the mom feel threatened when a child is expressing particularly interest in meeting the donor, himself or herself. How would you address that? This Eric is not expressing that, so this is not related to Eric. But how would you address the parents feeling threatened or sad or hurt because their child is wanting to make contact with a donor?
I love this question, and I get it all the time. And unfortunately, a lot of the donor agencies and do not encourage the recipient parents to have some kind of counseling prior to engaging in the donation. And the threat is not necessarily a real threat. It's the parents working through their fears and their concerns. Bonds between parents and children are not created because of genetics. They're created because of the emotional ties that build over time. So a lot of these feelings of being threatened are really not based on what's, on reality. And I really encourage people to look at this and really look at themselves and get through that there is no reason to be threatened, but I certainly understand it, and I do get that question a lot of times. It comes from a place of curiosity. These children want to know about themselves. It's not because they don't care about their parents.
And often they care very much about their parents.
Absolutely. Those are their parents.
Exactly. And sometimes children are afraid to express this curiosity to their parents out of a sense of loyalty. So they carry the burden on their own.
Well, it really depends on how the parents have handled it. If the parents are comfortable with what they've done and in the way they built a family, and that's what they present to their children, then their children are going to be okay. If the parents present concern and fear and discomfort and all of that, that's what the children are going to pick up and respond to. So it's really up to the parents. They set the stage.
We've interviewed Dr. Susan Golenbach twice on the show, and she echoes that through her research, what you just said. The kids are going to be okay if the parents are comfortable the kids are doing just fine.
Absolutely.
Problems come in when we as parents bring our own anxiety and insecurities to the table. All right, here's a question from Carrie. She says, we have a 6-year-old by donor sperm. We have met online other families who use the same donor. In all, there are 6 kids. My son is very proud that he has 6 siblings, but we worry about how it will affect him to think of them as siblings since it is not a sibling relationship. It also worries me that he talks about them at school as siblings. When the teacher asked how many siblings, or sisters and brothers, he said he had 6. She thought he was pretending, which made him mad. It is embarrassing to have to address our method of conception with the school. Also, I wonder if he will regret sharing this information when he is older and wants more privacy. At this point, I regret having made contact and having told him. How do others handle this? This is a really interesting question, and the child is 6. So thoughts on that?
Well, I applaud her for making the contact and being open about it. But I think, is it Carrie? Carrie needs to get comfortable with how she built her family. I'm sure she is. She loves her child and all of that. But once you hand over the information to a child, you have to help him process the information and help him do something with it if he wants to do something with it. In terms of being out there, so to speak, in terms of everybody else knowing how they built their family, that's something that the family has to sort of figure out. There is no shame, and I think this is where all of us have gone wrong over the years. There is no shame in donor-built families. And if we can get over that hump, all of these questions wouldn't even exist.
But considering that the whole rest of the world hasn't gotten over that hump, what we hear some families say, this is brought up periodically on our online support group, we hear them say, I'm going to wait till my child is old enough to know how to deal with this information, and what, in some times, what they're meaning is that is old enough not to, share it with the world, since this is private family information. Is that the right approach?
Unfortunately, in my experience, it's the wrong side, the downside. The downside is if you wait too long, you all of a sudden share this information with this child, and then there's some sense of broken trust is what I'm seeing in my practice, or have seen in my practice. What I encourage people to do, if they want to tell, if they're choosing to tell, is to tell very, very early, even before the child can understand it. There are so many books out there on donor-conceived children. And if you incorporate those books into your child's library very early on, and I'm talking about 2-3 years old, alongside of Goodnight Moon and Pat the Bunny, what they will understand is there's all kinds of families, and it's not just a mom and dad with a picket fence and a dog and a cat. But there are, basically donor-conceived families, surrogacy-built families, children that have single parent, two-dad families, single parent, ducks that live with chickens. And what you're teaching a child under those circumstances is that there's not one definition of family. So even though they don't understand donor conception, they do understand that there's not one definition of family. And I think that's very reassuring, and it also, helps them build tolerance themselves. So I think that is an approach that I have seen work.
And let me mention that one book is the one you wrote, which is Mommy, Did I Grow in Your Tummy? Where Babies Come From. So that's one book that I would recommend people consider. And we also, at the Creating a Family website, we list a lot of books for, including that one, for talking with your children about their conception, as well as talking with your children about their lots of different types of families and family of family. So we have all of that under, hover over the word infertility on the horizontal menu, and then click on suggested books. We also break them out. We give a brief review, and we break them out by age. I was interested in Carrie's saying that it bothers her that he calls them siblings, since it's not, or she worries how it will affect him because he speaks of them as siblings, but it's not a sibling relationship. How do people define the relationship with their donor sibling?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have the correct language yet, and I think over time we will have better words to describe these relationships that make more sense. But the thing is, he knows that they're not his siblings. They don't live in his house. They don't share toys. They don't eat their meals together. So experientially, he knows that these are not his brothers and sisters. But he doesn't have the language to call them something else. And yet he knows there's some kind of relationship. There's some connection there. And he just doesn't have the wherewithal to put it in a context that we have created for him, because we haven't created it yet. And I think in time that will happen. He calls them siblings. Is that hurting anything? He doesn't experience them as siblings. That's a whole different matter. Am I answering that question?
Yeah, you did, and she does. I was sitting here
Okay.
thinking she did not mention whether she has other children in the family, so that whether he has actual. So how do, in your experience counseling donor-conceived people, how do they feel towards how do they define the relationship, particularly when they're not 6, but when they're adults or adolescents? What is his relationship like? We don't have words because it's not. How do we define that relationship?
It's all over the board because it just depends on what the connection is. And some will become friendly and friends. Other people will meet each other once and there's no connection, there's no interest, but it fulfills a curiosity. So in terms of the language on how we define it, we don't have it yet. Bio-siblings is what we've come up with so far, donor siblings. But I think in time we'll have this figured out.
And with the donor himself or herself, what is that relationship for those people who have made contact with the donor?
Well, that is also, a great question, because I think the fear is that these children, if they do meet their donor at some point, that there's going to be this automatic emotional tie or bond with them. Mm-hmm. And that just does not happen. What happens is there's a curiosity that's fulfilled. They say, oh, I do have her ears or her nose or something like that. But the bond is with the parents, the people that brought them up, who put Band-Aids on their knees, who kissed them goodnight every night. The bond is not with this other person who hopefully they see as a nice person, but it's somebody that helped their parents have them. And this, again, is how did the parents talk about it to their children? And there's a way to do it that creates this kind of a context for how they're going to experience their donor. The donor is literally a stranger, by the way.
Absolutely. But with the increased emphasis on genetics in medicine, in particular, I think that curiosity will only be increased because we keep hearing about so many genetic bases for illnesses or for traits and things like that.
Right.
That I think it will only increase. How big
and
of
so
an
if
issue?
It's going to,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go.
No, I said if it's going to increase, then we need to sort of be comfortable with that concept.
Yeah.
And we have some work to do in that area.
Yeah, I was thinking, you took the words right out of my mouth. You couldn't have said it better. How big of an issue is donor-sibling relationships? I ask because I wonder how many parents are telling their kids and how many parents or children know information on the donor or the sibling.
Well, I have to say I live in California and I work in California, and I think our philosophy towards openness and anonymity might be different than other parts of the United States. So I have to sort of preface it with that. In terms of, I'm seeing more and more people share their story with their children. And again, I only see a population of people that are coming to me for these to basically talk about these kinds of things. I'm not seeing the people that are absolutely adamant about keeping this a secret for the rest of their years.
Yeah,
so
I'm so glad you
very
said that.
Small,
a
very specialized population that are more open and willing to talk about it and discuss what's the best course of action.
There has been some research, and I don't remember now the timing. It feels to me like we're reaching the point where people are ashamed to say that they're not telling their kids, which in a way is a step up. It's now, I think that there is more universally known that it's probably not a good idea to not tell your child their conception history, whether they were conceived through donor egg, sperm, surrogacy, embryo, whatever. But when and this was a couple of years ago, and I don't remember which show it was, but it stuck with me that it was a researcher that we had on, and she said the research was showing now that people, when they are shortly after conception or when they were pregnant, say that they are going to tell the child, but when they follow up at age 7 or 10, they have not told the child. So in a way we're making progress, because I agree with you that I don't think I see in what in the population that we work with a reluctance, a fair number of our audience is reluctant to tell. But at least now there is the feeling of, well, I probably shouldn't say it because it's probably not the right thing to do type of thing. I don't know.
Well, you're very kind. You say reluctance, but, I would sort of suggest that maybe there's some fear attached to that reluctance.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's what needs to be addressed. What are we afraid of? What is going to happen? Because we may find out that we're wrong. Our fears are not based on what really is true or going on. And that's what I think the research has sort of demonstrated, that telling a child and not carrying the burden of the secret around with you is probably just a healthier way to live. You're not always looking over your shoulder. Every time somebody says, where did your son get those blue eyes, you're not cringing as your child watches you cringe.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he thinks something's wrong with his blue eyes.
And it was interesting when on the panel we did, and they were all adults, and this panel was all conceived by a donor sperm. And at least half, or maybe more than half of the panel did not find out until adolescence or older, adulthood, and almost to a one, there was a feeling of that they knew something. And and so there was something that didn't make sense, and they knew it. They were picking up on subtleties that they had no way of identifying, but they intuitively knew something. And there was also universally, by the ones who found out older, there was a feeling of betrayal by their parents, and in some cases, the feeling of betrayal significantly damaged their relationship with their parent. In others, they worked past it.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's definitely a feeling of betrayal or trust. What other family secrets are there besides my conception? Yeah. But at the same time, what I when I run into this in my practice is that yes, there's a sense of loss of trust and some sense of betrayal, but they still love their parents. They still are bonded to their parents. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes it is not that difficult to work through it because the parents were just following protocol at the time. And if the children are... I'm sorry?
Well, when you see parents not telling, you said sometimes you think it's because they are afraid. What are they afraid of?
Well, they're afraid of exposing themselves, that they're just not like every other family. They have failed in some way. There's a shame factor involved in how they had to conceive. They needed help. It's not the storybook, fantasy on how people get pregnant and have babies. I think there's a lot going on, and it has to do with their own history and their own sense of family and what was told to them and what they believe in terms of genetic connection and bonds and relationships. So it's complicated. It's complicated.
And it seems
there
also,
is fear.
Yeah, I see it as well. And it seems that, I don't know if this is true, but that fundamentally they're afraid that their child will not view them as their mother or as the father, that it will somehow undermine the essence of their parental relationship with that child.
And I think the opposite is true. I mean, children are very clear about who their parents are. I think it's the parents that may have that tentativeness. And I hear sometimes children will do what I call test questions. Children, even though they know, they want to make sure that their parents do experience themselves as the parent. The child is very clear. Your mom, your dad, your dad. But the parents, have they shown tentativeness?
Give me an example of a test question. What do you mean by a test question?
A child hears something at school and comes home and says to their mother or their father, "You're not my real mom."
Mm-hmm.
Does that mother in that moment disintegrate, or does she stand up, put her shoulders back, and say, "Oh, yes, I am. I'm your real mom. I'm always going to be your mom, and I'm so glad I'm your mom, but you still have to go clean up your room."
Exactly. And because I'm your mom, you will go clean up your room. Yeah.
Right. So you have to present as parent. Children pick up lots of things from their parents. So if you present as parents, they're going to experience you as parents.
Yeah.
If you don't present as parents, then the children are going to say, "Wait a minute, something's amiss here."
Yeah, that's such a good. And those same words can be used for adoptive parents. We also talk about the "you're not my real mom" card being thrown in adoption as well, and the response is the same. Well,
it's
I
also
sure
a
feel
manipulation.
Like
yeah, because children want what they want, and if it's a button that works, they're going to press it.
I say that all the time. It depends on if it works. If you will give it power, it will work, and you will hear it. If you don't give it power, it won't work, and you probably won't hear it again.
Exactly.
If they're very smart, they're going to figure it out. So what does the research show on how children and young adults deal with contact with siblings or donors? Or has there been much research following?
There's been very, very little. I can give you, my clinical experience, which is, I do have a lot more people coming through my office that have found out or are making contacts with donor siblings, or the parents are orchestrating that. So, as I said before, the relationships vary from an acquaintance to absolutely nothing to a friendship.
But in your case, you're not seeing that children are confused, or that they are devastated, or that it's affecting their psychological health or anything along those lines?
The bottom line is the children are fine. Are the parents fine? That is more the question. We need to get the parents fine, and then the children will be fine. So they may have some other issues, but it will have nothing to do with being a donor-conceived child.
Yeah, there's so many ways we could screw up our kids. Yes,
right.
This one doesn't. This one does not have to be it. You are listening to Creating a Family. Today we're talking about donor conception, navigating donor and donor sibling relationships with Elaine Gordon. And you are listening to Creating a Family, and we are ranked as the number 2 online influencer worldwide in the area of infertility. We primarily hang out on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, and we would love to have you join us. There are 3 ways to connect with us on Facebook. You can like our Facebook page, which of course is Creating a Family. You can connect with me personally, which is Dawn.Davenport1, or you can join our large Facebook support group. A lot of people who have conceived through donor egg, sperm, or embryo are in that group. We talk about these topics frequently. And that group, it goes by Creating a Family. The easiest way, well, one way to find it is facebook.com/groups/Creating a Family. Or just type in the words Creating a Family in the Facebook search box, and both the page and the group will pop up, and you can like the page and join the group. All right, Dr. Gordon, we are, again, talking about relationships between donor-conceived children and their donor or their donor siblings. We have a question from Suzette, and I'm really glad we got this one. She says, I'm not sure if my question fits since I'm the donor, but I wonder how to explain to our kids that we donated 4 embryos to another couple, and they have 2 kids from them. We have 3 kids, ages 10, 8, and 5. I don't know whether we should tell them, and if so, at what age. And if we tell them and they want contact, what do we do? My husband and I strongly prefer not to have contact. We are open to sharing medical information, which is how we know that they had 2 kids. So I was glad we got a question from a donor, because although we think often in times of the half-siblings, the donor siblings, on the side of the recipient family, but we don't often think about the children of the donors themselves. And I've not seen any research on sperm donors or egg donors. I don't know how many even are telling their children. But anyway, this is an embryo donation situation. So let's address Suzette's questions. Should she tell them, and if so, what age, and what does she do about the fact that she and her husband really do not want contact?
Well, she and her husband are allowed to sort of, dictate that, whether they want contact or not. I don't know what the relationship was between she and the recipient couple at the time, whether there was any exchange of information, any promises made on either side, or plans for the future. So that would have to be taken into consideration. In terms of telling, it could be a wonderful lesson for her children. Excuse me. There were people that needed some help, and she, when she was young or whatever, that she decided that she had these eggs she wasn't using at the time, and she wanted to help somebody else have babies who really wanted them. She can really write a lovely, lovely scenario, outlining, what she did. She doesn't know whether her children will be curious or not curious. They may say, okay, Mom, can we go out and play? Or they'll go, tell me more. So
now, let me just interject that in Suzette's case, they donated embryos, so these would be full biological.
Embryos.
Yes,
okay, I'm sorry.
Yes. But although your point,
I misunderstood.
But it could apply to an egg donor. But in this case, it was an embryo donation.
Okay.
So I'm assuming they're full biological siblings.
Right.
I may be wrong. They may not be full biological siblings, but the question reads as if they are.
Okay, I have a different twist then. Initially the decision-making, the information belonged to the collective parents. All these parents need to at some point decide whether their children, who are not always going to be children, they're going to be adults someday, do they have a right to this information? It's almost a philosophical decision. In some way, I have my own bias about that, of course, but they have to decide, who does the information belong to? If they come to the realization or the conclusion that the information belongs to their children and they do have a right to know, then of course you should share the information. And she can talk about why she made that donation. And it's really a beautiful story. She didn't want these embryos to go to waste. Now Suzette needs to also look at why she doesn't want contact. And that's what's that all about? What is her concern? What is her fears? So, again, I don't have information about that, so I can't speak to that. That is, it's not a one answer. It just really depends on her circumstances, her feelings, and what's going on. I don't know what the expectation is on the from the receiving family. They may not want contact either. I don't know. So I think I would need more information to appropriately make some suggestions or guide.
In this case, let's make the I hear exactly what you're saying. I think we can make, let's make, I don't know if we can, but let's make the assumption that they're not, that Suzette is not violating any agreement that she made to contact.
Right.
I don't know whether or not why she does not have contact and why she doesn't want it, but I will say that I have a while back interviewed a lot of families who were either considering donating or had donated their embryos. And one reason, which is, again, this may or may not be Suzette's, but one reason they don't want contact is that it was a very difficult decision for many people, and there is a feeling that I don't want it to be as real that it's the concern that they feel like they would have given away their children. Now, that is not oftentimes it's not logical. And they would say that. They would say, this is not at all how I believe. And yet, on an emotional level, this is just really hard for me. Some people specifically say that they requested not to know if any children were conceived. And as one woman said, I tell myself when I worry and I think about it that there are probably no children conceived, and that's how I go by. That's how I live. So anyway, I'll throw that out there as something that I've heard from others. Not necessarily
excellent points, because again, it's almost like sticking your head in the sand, and I don't mean that in a mean-spirited way at all. It's that if you close your eyes, your environment is still there. Why? Okay, first of all, in my embryo donation sort of experiences, and I've done a number of them, the donation of anonymous embryos, I think, is harder than the donation of anonymous sperm or egg.
I agree.
And why practices are encouraging anonymous donation, I don't know why. I really, it puzzles me. Why isn't some counseling required prior to donating embryos? Because the truth is, my experience is, what a gift, what a great, great thing to do for someone else. And if you also were part of the knowing who those embryos were going to go to, I think it minimizes the fear and the concern. To just donate embryos, I think it's been hard on people, and I think that's why people aren't doing it, because practices are not giving people the opportunity to be part of that process. And I think that would change things quite a bit. I had one couple tell me, basically talking about this issue and any concerns about meeting the bio siblings or the other children from the other family, and this mother said to me, the more the merrier. That was her attitude, and she was excited about it, to have her children have more siblings, even though they will not consider themselves as siblings. But it's sort of an interesting sort of relationship connection. It could be done beautifully. Again, I think we get back to the basic, what is the fear, what is the concern, what are people concerned about that's going to happen, which may not be based on what really is going to actually happen.
Now let's talk about what you first assumed the question was, because, and I'm going to get, that is, do women who donated eggs, now we're talking eggs, not embryos, or men who donated sperm, is my experience is that this is not necessarily something that they are telling even their spouses, much less their children. But I'm curious. Do you think that egg donors and sperm donors are telling their children that they may have siblings out there somewhere?
Well, sperm donors are not psychologically consulted with, so I don't know about sperm donors as much as I know about egg donors, except if it's a known sperm donor. Egg donors, when I screen egg donors, and I've screened hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of egg donors at this point, my question is, are they going to tell their children? And I counsel them on that. I counsel them, have they told their parents? And I think it's important for them to make an informed decision about who they're going to disclose to. And how they feel about telling their children, and what's the upside, what's the downside. So I think all these issues need to be addressed prior to the donation, and unfortunately in so many cases we don't do it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I don't know that how many, number one, how many are getting, I think most are probably getting some type of psychological counseling, but how in-depth and was this question asked? So do most most egg donors that you've talked with, I'm going to guess probably haven't thought of that issue, but how are they falling out? Of course, they haven't had kids, or some of them have not had kids, so they don't actually know what they're going to do. But are many of them thinking they're going to tell, or are their expectation is no, they're not going to?
A lot of them, I would say most, and I would say sure, I'm going to tell them. I told I think it's exciting. I think it's wonderful. I'll be happy to tell them. Once in a while, I get somebody that will say no, but a question that I ask prior to that question is oftentimes I have their application and it says they're doing an anonymous donation. And I ask them, I say, it says you're doing an anonymous donation, but what if the parents or the intended parents changed their mind and wanted to meet you? I would say 99.9% of those donors have said to me, absolutely, I just thought they didn't want to meet me. That's why I checked that box.
Huh, interesting. That's fascinating.
And I think the agencies set it up to do anonymous donation, for maybe not all the right reasons.
Well, with it's a highly debated in sperm donation whether if requiring, and there's some evidence that would indicate, and I've not followed the research, so I shouldn't say there's evidence because I'm sure this is ongoing research, but that if you require sperm donors to be share identifying information when the child turns 18, that it cuts the number of donors. So maybe it is different with sperm donors versus egg donors. But there's still plenty of cryobanks that have got great selections of donors who have wanted to, they have agreed to be identified if the child or the recipient family wants it. So I don't know how. Have you heard? Have you followed any of the discussion as to the requirements? Certain countries have have banned anonymous sperm donation. Right,
they have Australia. So there are countries, and I think that's going to be a trend. The more open, the more non-anonymous donation, I think is the future. Because I don't think you're going to be able to keep it a secret in the first place. But secondly, you have to ask yourself, why are we hiding? What's there to hide? Why are we keeping these secrets? There's no shame to this. And I think as more and more families use donors and surrogates and sperm donors, that we're going to see much more comfort with alternative family building family building options.
And one thing that I think we should note is that many cryobanks would like to know if you've made contact with half siblings or donor siblings. So it's something to consider about reporting back to your cryobank that you've made contact, because that's something that is important to some of them, at least, that they would like to know. And some cryobanks facilitate contact through family forums where they allow verified users of a specific. They provide the forum for you to go to, and the people who come in have been verified that they actually did use that donor. So I think that we're going to see, and I think as that spreads and we see more cryobanks doing that, I know that some do, and so
it's definitely a trend.
Yeah, and that's something, and it will become more of a trend if people who want to use donated sperm are asking for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I want to shift slightly and talk about navigating sibling relationships, not necessarily with donor siblings, but if you're a family that's built through both donor child, as a child conceived through a donor egg or sperm, and a child that was conceived naturally. How are those relationships? I mean, those families are also increasing as we see greater acceptance of sperm donation and egg donation and embryo donation. And then sometimes they conceive naturally afterwards, or sometimes this is secondary infertility. So how does that complication, or is that a complication that families have to deal with?
Well, it definitely could be a complication, but we're getting back to how do the parents feel? How are they presenting to these children? How are they talking to their children about it? If the parents are comfortable and excited and happy with their family building scenario, then the children are going to be fine. We do encourage telling the truth. Otherwise, it creates sort of this imbalance in the family system. But are they sort of saying, we had you, we wanted to have another baby, we wanted you to have a brother or sister, and, we were having trouble, and we went to a doctor, and he told us how to do this, and we're so excited, and we were able to have another baby, and this nice lady gave us an egg. However it is, but there are books that explain that. And this is just matter of fact. This is the way we built our family. And if you're treating the two children, a lot of sort of the issues, some people will say that the children are not getting along. They're not getting along because one is a full genetic sibling and one's a half genetic child. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're not getting along because one is bossy and one breaks the other one's toys, and one is just crankier than the other. So it's very easy to tie and to associate any family issue with the idea of it's because of the adoption, the donation, the surrogacy, or whatever. And it's not necessarily tied to that at all. In fact, more often or not, it's not.
What about the situation where it's reversed, where they, and because I see this one more often, I don't know if it happens more often, it's just that I see it more often, and that is that they used, let's say, donor sperm to conceive, and I'm thinking of a heterosexual couples, used donor sperm to conceive their first child, and then either because their finances improved or because technology improved, and intracytoplasmic sperm injection has really revolutionized the treatment of male infertility. So they were able to go back and conceive a child through, maybe naturally, but also maybe through IVF with the use of ICSI. So it is the second child that is can you just I liked how you gave words to the family, to the parents. Can you give them the words to how an example of how you might explain to the children that you wanted, because in essence it almost feels like, well, the first way wasn't good enough. I wanted to have this biological connection, so I went back to do it and I'm using air quotes around the word better way.
Well, if the child feels connected to the parents, that's not going to be an issue. They're not going to feel less than. It's again telling them the truth. We wanted to have more babies, and the technology has improved, and we're going back, and guess what? It worked. You're going to have a brother or a sister or both or whatever. I think we hide behind, these fears that these children are less than, and they're not. And the burden is on the parents. Is how do they feel about how they built their family? It's just life. Now we're going to have a baby this way. We had a baby that way, and maybe down the line we'll have a baby even another way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have to fall for and have to apologize. I don't want parents to get into that place. Or justify. Or giving power to the notion that and being prepared for to not give power to if a child is you like Susie better because she's got daddy's full daddy's child and I'm not, or something like that. I would tell parents, don't fall for it. That's a manipulation.
Exactly. If you give it power, you'll hear it again.
Yeah.
If you don't give it power, it won't
Child
happen.
who says that has an agenda.
Yeah, and needs to consider law school because that's bright. So the last word I want to have is to talk a little bit about family secrets. You've alluded to that, but the notion of not telling, or the notion of downplaying sibling relationships, and the fear of wanting to avoid those relationships, encouraging you not to tell. What is your experience on the existence of a truth that you are not telling in a family that becomes a secret?
Well, if it's called a secret, if it is a secret, it's a burden to carry that you'll have to carry and guard against disclosing that secret over a lifetime. And I think that's a heavy burden for parents to carry. Now, in terms of, I also look at there's a difference between a secret and something that's private. A secret is it's information you're keeping from people where the information is relevant, and that's the child or the children. Something private is the grocery store clerk doesn't need to know you used a sperm donor. They don't really care. So
it also has no relevance to them, right?
It's no relevance at all. So I look at secrecy and privacy as different entities. And if you put it in that context, I think it's easier to navigate who knows what.
But as you said before, though, as you tell your child, you can't control who your child tells. So that's something, but that's no excuse for not telling the child just because you can't control it.
Well, why you have to look at why you want to control it, and that gets back to the fear and the shame.
So if a family is
thinking
feeling...
thinking the child's going to be ostracized in some way.
Well, and I have heard, and this can be a real thing, where for the families, they don't see a distinction nor feel a distinction, but they feel like their extended family, their parents, would treat or would feel differently towards. For example, they used a sperm donor, and they used donated sperm, and they fear that the husband's parents, the husband's extended family, will feel differently about the child. I have heard that a lot. Now, whether or not that is reality, who knows? But I certainly hear that one.
Well, I also think it has to do with the relationship that person has with her in-laws, so to speak. Now, if that relationship is a strong bond and it's a nice family relationship, it's probably going to be a non-issue.
True. In this
Parents
case, I was
love,
guessing it probably
they want grandchildren.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's a risk, and there's a cultural consideration that has to be brought into the picture.
Yeah, exactly.
And that has to be respected. So we've been talking about really, the culture here in the United States for the most part. Mm-hmm. So if that exists, no, there's probably a different way to handle it and deal with it. But I do think it's a burden. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And why would you carry a burden around if you don't have to?
Well, and here's the other thing. So often people have told someone. It's not just the husband and the wife alone, the mother and the father alone who know this information. And if you have told one other person, chances are extraordinarily good that person told one other person. And then that other person told one other person. So you have to look realistically. The worst thing that can happen is for the child to hear it from other people and not from their parents. So that's
then what the parent is doing is always looking for, clues whether they know or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a little paranoia that sort of kicks in a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that cannot be good for anybody, let's just be honest. I mean, that cannot be good. We got enough problems in parent-child relationships that we don't need to add that in there, especially when they're teens.
Well, my overall experience with people that have disclosed and that are open, they just walk more comfortably in their shoes. The people that are choosing not to tell or are afraid to tell, they're still walking in their shoes, but they're just not as comfortable.
That's such a good way to say it. Yeah, it's such a good, and that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Dr. Elaine Gordon, for being our guest today on Creating a Family. Please keep in mind that the information given in this interview is general advice. To understand how it applies to your specific situation, you need to work with your infertility professional. If you've enjoyed the show and want to help it grow, please do us a favor and rate this podcast on iTunes. We're currently ranked as the #1 show in this area, and we want to keep that ranking. And it also, quite frankly, just allows other people, this is what iTunes uses to suggest shows, the rankings. So it would, if you've enjoyed it, somebody else will enjoy it. So please do us a favor and give us it's a star ranking. It's really easy to do. Just click on our name in whatever the app is you're using, and it will take you to the rating part. To get more information on Dr. Elaine Gordon, you can go to her website, which is ElaineGordon.com. Let me spell that, ElaineGordon.com. I am sure that you're going to want to get more information. You can also, I think, probably, Dr. Gordon, can they buy the book there, or would you recommend that they go to Amazon to buy the book?
They can go to Amazon or the website, either one.
Either one. So you go either way. She probably gets more of the profits if you go to her, just going to say. So you may want to do that. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I will see you next week.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
The Starlight Lounge presents An Evening with the Progressive Box.
Old moon, yeah. That's Hugo, tickling the ivories. He just saved by bundling home and auto with Progressive. Gonna finally buy a ring for that gal of yours, Hugo? Send her my condolences. Hi-oh! This next one's for you, too. There's a burglar in my heart. Thank you.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discounts not available in all states or situations.